on the call. We have the case that's up for recommendation tonight. And prior to that, I'd like to make a comment. First of all, you conveyed to board you have no interest in proceeding on any issues. Okay. Probably would admonish everybody, let's be careful with our conversations so they can't be misconstrued or prejudging or being biased in this forum. Okay. Pursuant to the Illinois Attorney General's guidance to public bodies on the Open Meeting Act during the COVID-19 pandemic, it's dated July 2nd, 2020. Zoning Board of Appeals members may participate without being physically present in compliance with the established provisions. We presently have 6 of the 7 board members here, and the chairman is on via phone. He had a medical issue this afternoon and was not going to be here in person. Having said that, I'd like to make a comment before we begin. This was originally in front of us when they made the application for a group home, which is a permitted use under the purview of our code. And it would be limited, our ability to deny it, if we have shown something like it's unique, it's not allowed anywhere else in the district. They're in front of us today to change it to a group dwelling. And it's no longer a permitted use, and they have to prove up a conditional use. And at the last meeting, there were some issues raised by the public, concerns as to the effect of this change on their rights. And the ones I highlighted, I'd like to comment, bring these out, and then see comments from the board, what the feeling is, if we should proceed or get another hearing or whatever. Presently, the home has 10 staff members. If it's approved, they want to go to 12. What it says is that what was said by the complainants was that increase brought additional cars, which brings me to the next point. Presently, there are 10 cars of staff on a given day there. They have, and that will increase to 12 cars. They have 17 parking spots that are there now. It'll stay at 17. It's not delineated how they would park on those, which might be another issue. And then there's visits. And during those visits, we really don't know how many per day or the time they will be there. They are conducted after dinner through the early hours of the evening, but that could pose a problem with the number of cars. There was a comment by one of the public members that as a citizen, he's only allowed 6 cars on his lot, and the increase in cars would not only affect his enjoyment of his property, but he felt it would, paraphrasing, would affect the value of his home because it starts looking like a non-residential. And I had made my opening comments because once they moved out of that permitted use to a conditional use area, the number of cars becomes an issue. The visits, there's no limit under the conditional use, and there was no limit under their proposed conditional use. And while the hours are not specific, I'm assuming after dinner to the early evening is open for debate. Outside activities were brought up. They're not specific in the presentation under the conditional use. It was also thrown out that there's an outdoor patio, but there were no specifics on that. So I think we're at a position where I have some questions regarding this effect on the use enjoyment and the property values. Since the chairman is here, he had some concerns. He was going to give Jessica an email on it, but if he's here on the phone, I'll start with him and then look to the other board members, and then we can decide what we will do to proceed.
Well, thank you, Barry. You hit.
This is when you're on, Bob. You'd say something. Let us know you're on.
Yeah. Can you hear me? Oh my. Barry, are you able to hear me?
What was that?
It's lit up,
Are-
but
are-
it's not.
Is anyone
Well,
able
I'll
to hear
read
me?
his points are that he was afraid he wouldn't be here, but since it looks like we're having communication difficulty, we'll go on. One of his concerns was the septic system, but in the interim, we did receive the information from the state and the question of what was done. Your comments in the record show it was built. He was a little concerned that Public Works hadn't weighed in and that his concern was, I'm not sure he had a chance to read the state's thing, was about a single family home with 12 residents and 12 staff members and visitors if the field that's in there would take care of it. Okay, go ahead, Bob.
Yeah, are you able to hear me at all?
Yes, we hear you now.
Okay. So my concern was that the DuPage County Department of Public Works, which usually comments on matters such as these, has indicated that they have no jurisdiction and therefore gave us no guidance whatsoever. The petitioner made some conclusory remarks that upgrades were made to the septic system, and those upgrades were approved by the state of Illinois. I don't know any of the details of that. I don't profess to be an expert in this matter, but we have had a lot of testimony over the years about various septic systems, etc. So now we will have a facility with 12 residents, some number of staff, regular visitors, and we have a conclusory statement from the petitioner that we're approved by the state of Illinois. I think in order to sort of exercise our responsibility, we need to know something more of the nature of the improvements as well as the details of the regulatory oversight by, I guess it was the I forgot which agency, but one of the IEPA or some such agency. So I'd like to have some meat on the bones rather than a conclusory statement that we're in compliance and we're approved. Secondly, my other issue is, given the impact on the neighborhood, I believe it discharges our responsibility fully if we know total number of vehicles on the site at any time, where there is outside activity, when the outside activity occurs. Is it limited to earlier times in the winter time when it's darker earlier? How is it supervised? What is the number of people? How many visitors appear at various times? Where do they park? Are we sure that there aren't headlights that are impinging on the neighbor's use of their property, etc.? So the presentation seemed to me to be, whatever we have now is approved, and whatever we ask for is a very modest increase, so you should approve that too. That's a little bit unfair, I suppose, because there was some detail. But in order to impose the kind of operating restrictions and conditions that we typically impose, I think we need a lot more detail. Some of that detail was invited, and I don't know that it was presented. I don't have anything as of this morning. I've been out of pocket since then. that shows that we did have additional information. I don't think a recommendation hearing is the place to make the record, because no matter what the petitioner says, we can't take public comment in response. So I'm not ready to make a favorable, I'm inclined to be favorable, but I'm not ready to make a favorable determination on this case without being able to impose meaningful conditions. These are the kind of conditions that we always approve or add to a conditional use. So I don't know. Maybe I don't know if anyone feels in any way as I do. If I'm off on a wild goose chase here, I have no objection if the case proceeds, but that's my view. And I listed a couple of other details. Frankly, I'm not operating on all 8 cylinders because I just had an anesthetic that I'm recovering from, but too bad for me. So that's my thoughts on the subject.
All right, Bob, I kind of opened with my concerns, and I was going to then look to the board for their points. I kind of feel what you're feeling. If we're going to get more testimony, then we're going to have to anyways, because the public has right to be here and then have an input on those questions. So I've stated my concerns. Bob has. Let's start at one end. Janice, you want to start? Do you have concerns? Why don't you make them, and then we can decide what we're going to do.
Well, based upon the previous group quarters that were presented in a different area, we're inclined to approve this. They've jumped through the hoops. I did raise the concerns about the garbage and other items, and I did go visit the property, and many of the homeowners, had a lot of cars also. So I was kind of a little put back by that. And, I went through in the driveways, I went in each of your driveways, and I get it. But I don't mind putting some conditions on there so we have some things to come back on, and maybe the petitioner would maybe we want to hear from him about that. We should have got to a recommendation meeting. We should have maybe postponed that if there were concerns before that. So I don't know why we're here approving this if we had those concerns before, but I'm inclined to approve it, but there should be some conditions. I agree with the chairman and you and the vice chairman that there are some things on there, but I'm sure we can figure this out with council.
Let me just give you one thing. Do you feel there are issues? If you're going to talk to council, we will have to have another hearing because the public has a right to be here and here. Okay. So it seems like you're for, and the chairman's for, probably a follow-up meeting.
I am. I would just wish that we'd come to this.
Well, I don't know how it would have. We left with that information. Well, the easiest way, let me just do one thing. Are you content with your presentation as is?
I think some of the questions.
Just yes or no?
I'm content, but the answers to the questions are in our presentation.
Having heard what I said, Janice said, Bob said, I'll let everybody else speak. If you are, then I am ready to vote because I think it's pretty clear then there are, at least in my mind, questions that are not answered.
Please don't misunderstand. Julie, look at both sides. For the record, Mark Gershon, representing the petitioner. My answer was that I believe that the questions that are being raised are actually in our presentation. As an example, we talked about how many visitors there would be during the week. There's a lot of information. It's a very heavy package, so I'm not blaming anyone for not seeing them there. But also clearly, we believe this is a use that is.
I'm not going to allow testimony. We're here to decide first. If you're content with your presentation, then we'll vote on our own feelings as to that presentation. I told you what my concerns were. The chairman weighed in, Janice has weighed in. I'll get the rest of the board members, but it appears that you're going to rest on your presentation. You think you've answered everything. So I think it's probably an effort in futility then for us all to weigh in. So that's.
Mr. Chair, pause for interrupting. I believe our presentation had the information, but if you want further information, that's what we're here for. We clearly want you to have the information you need to support the project. So the fact that I may feel it's in there, if you don't and we need to get there for you to be able to support it, then obviously that's our desire to do so.
Here's my point. The courts have told us we are not to do your case. We're not to show any favoritism or any negativism. We asked the question if you felt your present. I made concerns, Janice made concerns, Bob made concerns, the rest of the board members can say it. You felt for Bob's, Janice, and mine, you made the presentation. So that's the only issue before us.
To be clear, my comment was I do believe we addressed the questions, but if you have additional comments or concerns, we want to make sure you have the time for us to hear those. I believe I can present those without adding new evidence to the record, but if you would prefer to come back, clearly my goal here is not for this project to be voted down because you feel you don't have the information.
All right, I'll see what the rest of the board feels and then we'll go from there.
Mr. Chairman and members of the board, for the record, I would tend to agree with what has been said thus far. I have reservations about the parking simply because we do not know what the limit, if any, exists on the number of people who will come to visit. There are 12 residents. There could be 2 visitors or 3 visitors coming per person. Are we going to have 36 cars there? What is allowed and which days? The other thing is outdoor activity. I'm not really clear as to what it is going to be like. I read that it is going to be supervised, but what is the nature going to be and other things like that. And Mr. Haas, did we get what's it called? What's escaping me? Lighting. I'm sorry. The sewer, of course.
What were you looking for?
I was looking for about the lighting. We were supposed to get something pertaining to the lighting. I suppose I might be able to see better if I put on my spectacles.
There's no lighting that will exceed the residential standard of 0.5-foot candle at the property line.
Okay.
So they'll be in compliance.
Okay, so you are satisfied that you got that information?
Yeah, that is,
Okay.
it will be no more than 0.5 and in all likelihood less than 0.5 residential lighting.
So with that, my personal opinion is I'm not ready to vote for this, in favor of this, until those things are resolved to the satisfaction of the board. Other than that, I would be favorably inclined towards the project, but I think that's evidence that needs to be presented. Thank you.
My concern is basically on the visitors parking, that if they regulated that only somebody can come in at certain times and how the parking is arranged here. Otherwise, the building and everything looks very nice and I think it's an asset to the area.
Thank you. And Mr. Chair, I'd like to clarify my point before. We have no objection. If you want additional information, no objection to your calling an additional public hearing. We want you to get the information you need to be comfortable with the project.
All right, I think the majority of the board feels that we should have a hearing, let the public be present to hear the specifics, have any input on that. It appears the next the date we have is June 24th. You've heard the concerns. I'm not going to tell you what or how to do it to address it in the next hearing. But that's where we're at. And I just did a cursory reading of the transcript again after having read it at home and that. I think some of these questions haven't been fully answered. So with that in mind, this hearing will then be continued to June 24th at 6 o'clock in here. Okay, we just, this was set up for a recommendation meeting. We're going to republish, and that's one of the reasons it's pushed out to June 24th. So it'll be republished, and then we will meet here. We'll open with your comments, presentations, whatever, and then we will look to the public if these are new issues that they can have additional comments.
And can we, this is Bob Carthel again, can we take the, after that hearing closes, we might schedule the recommendation at the same time. If we're able to vote, we're able to vote. If not, we postpone it. But I think it seems highly likely that if we get this information on June 24, we'd be able to close the public hearing and open an immediate recommendation.
We've done that numerous times. Did you want it published in the paper so the public knows that we do that, or just is that for the board's benefit that you had mentioned that?
Oh, I think that's a procedural detail for the staff. I'm just suggesting it as a matter of if we publish the continued public hearing, we may well find ourselves to be in a position, without committing one way or the other, we may well find ourselves to be in a position to adjourn to recommendation immediately.
Okay, and this will be republished, and absent a problem with publication, we will meet on June 24th at 6 o'clock in here. Right, that's what Bob said. We've done that on numerous times. There was a question, Bob, that it appears may not be a problem if we went right into recommendation. That we do on each individual basis depending on what goes on that night, right?
Exactly.
Okay.
I would offer a motion to reconvene the recommendation meeting to the 24th following continued public hearing, which must be republished.
I'll second Chairman Carthel's motion.
There's been a motion and a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Hearing
Aye.
no opposition, it passes unanimously. And it will be continued then to June 24th, absent publication problems or something else.
Thank you for your comments. We're best to respond.
All right. We have a couple items still on the agenda. Is there any old business or new business? Do we have any public comment?
Yes. That's the, nothing really.
Nobody in the audience wants to do it. Is anybody signed in online or on the phone that wants to make a comment? Okay, then the meeting is closed for tonight.